Okay, so that's 11 o'clock and it's time to start the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Rob Lambden. I'm joined by my colleague Chris Portway.
Hello there.
Chris is a product specialist with us. He's going to be talking to us about some of the product features later on. So just to start off with, we just want to set the tone for what we're doing, in particularly what we mean by the Online 50 software webinars. So first of all, we're looking at operational requirements within your organisation. What is it that the organisation needs to do, both in terms of process capability and also the information that they derive from that? And then based on that, exploring what capabilities there are in software to support it. One of the things we're intending to do is to illustrate differences between different software packages. And of course, the reason for doing that is to empower users so they can make informed choices about their software that they're going to use. Online 50, of course, is best known for hosting Sage 50, but we don't only host Sage 50. We're going to be talking today in particular about SAP Business One, which is part of our Ambition Enterprise offering. Okay, so first off, we're talking about stock tracking. Is it applicable to everyone? Today, we're going to focus specifically on using batch numbers and serial numbers when you're tracking stock, but there are more general reasons to track stock. And the first thing is to have a proper understanding of what it is you sell. So if you record stock codes on your sales orders, you can then report sales volumes by stock code. So irrespective of whether you're coding them on a nominal ledger differently, you can start getting some sales volume reporting because it's on a sales order. You can get that by customer. Because it has a date, you can do sales volume by customer by date range. So that kind of information, if that's useful to you, then using stock codes, irrespective of whether you're selling physical product or not, is going to be useful. Another common reason to use stock codes is to manage pricing. Users are able to remember stock codes. You can then assign special prices to customers based on those stock codes, and users don't have to remember all the details of all the prices that people want. So those are kind of basic reasons. More advanced reasons, typically related to people actually selling physical stock. So here are some of the reasons why you might want to do that. Accurate cost of sales, we're going to be talking about that today. If you have particular items tracked and you've got particular costs associated with those items, then obviously you're getting a true cost of sales coming through. Ongoing liability, so warranty, any service things that you have to have. If you have intangibles, so for example software licenses or service agreements, you can often have ongoing liabilities associated with that sale. So even though that's not a physical product, having an understanding of when that product was sold and when your liabilities in respect of it finish is a useful thing to have. Managing perishable stock. So this is obviously very common in the food industry, also useful for things like pharmaceuticals, where stock can degrade certain scientific supplies. I remember when I was a physics student looking at half-life of different supplies, and when we were sent americium 241, it had to be a particular age, otherwise it was no good to us. So perishable items, obviously we need to know how long we've got for the useful life of the item when it needs to be sold. And unique items, so a serial numbered item, if we want to know specifically how to track a particular item, we need to track that with an item. So what are we meaning when we're saying tracking by batch? Well, batch is sometimes called lots of products. We've got multiple units of the same item, so if you're making coffee in a batch, your batch of coffee could have, depending on the size of your production run, several hundred tons, I guess, of coffee produced in the same batch. May obviously have smaller batches. But the idea of tracking the batches, you've got common characteristics. So with the coffee example, there's going to be what went into the blend, what the yield was. Because it's a natural product, you often won't get the same outputs with the same inputs. So characteristics of that batch can all be tracked together. And obviously, if it is coffee, it's consumable, and therefore you're going to give it an expiry date. So what are the common reasons to track by batch? Typically we're identifying results of the same process as we've spoken about. Tracking expiry date is probably the one I hear people asking about the most. They need to know when products' useful life is over. So typical business scenarios, obviously you've got expiration date tracking, we've spoken about that. Enabling product recalls. Now, of course, this has to happen throughout the supply chain. So even if you're not involved in manufacturing a batch, if you're involved in selling the batch, then you may find that the manufacturer issues a recall, and you need to know where that batch has gone. And we spoke before about true stock costing. I mentioned coffee. If you have a process where the cost of the batch is going to vary, then if you're tracking the costs against the batch, you'd be able to get a true stock cost. And of course, those costs don't necessarily have to be production related. Shipping, exchange rates, all kinds of things can actually affect the cost on a specific batch that you're processing. The other factor we're talking about is tracking by serial number. So the serial number is unique. Each item has its own unique serial number. Now, what do we mean by that? We mean that for a particular stock code, there will only ever be one instance of a serial number. You could, of course, have two serial numbers that are the same for different stock codes. It doesn't often happen because people generally are generating a specific format of serial number. But if you're involved in reselling product and you want to use the manufacturer's serial numbers and you've got different manufacturers, clearly they might both produce the same serial number, but it would be for a different item. So therefore, it's going to be unique within that stock code. Common reasons for tracking items. Well, specific items that are sold in a transaction. Is that important? Depends on the nature of the product that you're selling, but clearly it can be. Locating a particular item. If you're tracking serial numbers, you may have items moving between different stock locations, being issued to customers. You need to know where it is, where it's been, and you can get a full history if you're tracking that serial number. And of course, again, we've got the tracking of costs, but if you've got after-sale liabilities that go with that product, then you can be tracking your costs associated with that product, both at the time of sale and in terms of any post-sale service that's been delivered. Okay. So typical business scenarios, we've talked about warranty and service agreements. Fault tracking, if you know that there are faults with particular serial numbered items, you're going to be seeing those coming up against the same item. And often it's larger value items where there's a level of implementation that goes with the product. You may want to track the costs of that, or there's some after-sales service. So typically we don't see serial numbers on low-value items. You can, of course, use them, but for many people, the level of detail is it's not worth it if the value of the item is low. And of course, it's worth saying that some items, of course, might need both. It's a manufactured item, it's manufactured as part of the batch, and you want to understand the batch characteristics, but it could be identified with a specific serial number. A serial number is not just the same thing as having a batch with only one item in it, because it can be, as I say, part of a batch of other products. Okay, so those are a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the business reasons for tracking stock and specifically looking at batches and serial numbers. Let's look at what software support is available. So first of all, Sage 50, which an awful lot of our users are using, has no support currently for either batch or serial numbers. We do have people who track those. Typically they're using an external system, Excel spreadsheets. In small quantities that can work, but clearly the more tracking you have to do, the more unwieldy that becomes. Separately, we have done presentations on signs that your software is inadequate and tracking excessively in Excel. We use the phrase Excel to excess is a sign that perhaps you need some more support within your business software for processes that aren't there. As I say, small volume tracking in an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database or something like that can be adequate. If you're doing it in large volume and you need the robustness of ensuring you've got end-to-end tracking, Excel probably is not going to be sufficient for you. Ambition Enterprise, that's the licenses that we issue. That includes a product called SAP Business One. SAP is obviously a very large global software company. Business One is a very interesting product from our perspective. It can scale down very neatly, so someone who is using Sage 50 could transition to it. A single user license is going to be cost comparable to using Sage 50. But it's also international in design. It's scales very well, so you can go from one user to hundreds of users. And it's got much more flexible support for information and business processes. So it supports both batch and serial numbers. Looking at the software capabilities, in SAP Business One, by individual stock codes, you can turn on tracking by a serial number or batch number, but you can't do both. So you track each item either in batches or in serial numbers. You can identify the characteristics of a batch. So for a particular batch, you can say, here is the expiry date, is one of the things we've talked about. If it's a chemical product, you may want levels of impurities, that kind of thing. And you can identify characteristics of serial numbers. Serial number, one of the characteristics can include a lot or a batch number. And you can also, if you choose, have your serial numbers automatically assigned for you by the system. Okay, so that's a lot of talk from me. I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to take you through a demo of serial numbers in SAP Business One. Hopefully all this will work, and it's over to Chris.
In this demo, we will set an item to be managed by serial numbers, automatically create serial numbers according to a pattern, sell and deliver serialized items, and run the serial number transaction report. The first step is to set an item to be managed by serial numbers. So I'm going to go to Stock Management and then Item Master Data. I'm going to search for the item K4000. And then I'll select Find. Here there's a section for Manage Item By. I'll select the drop down, and then here I'm going to select Serial Numbers. And then the management method appears. Here we've got two options, on every transaction and on release only. So on every transaction, a serial number has to be selected when the stock item goes into and out of inventory, and on release only is when it goes out of inventory. In this scenario, I'm going to select on every transaction, and then I will select update and then OK. Okay, now I'm going to create a goods receipt PO. I'm going to go to purchasing and then goods receipt PO. Going to type in the supplier V1010. I'm going to input the item number K4000, and I'm going to put an item quantity of 5. Okay, so I'm going to right click on quantity and then go to batch serial numbers. And then I'm going to select automatic creation. And then if you click the 3 dots next to serial number, here we're going to create an automatic numbering series for it. So here I'm going to enter K4 into and keep the type as string. And then for the next section, I'm going to put 000001. And I'm going to change the type to number. And then I'm going to change the operation to increase. So each time there's a new serial number, it will increase the number by 1. So I'm going to select OK. And as you can see, it gives you an example. The first one will be K4 and then ending with 1. I'm going to enter a lot number of 30. It's going to have a manufacturing date of the 5th of January. So I'm going to select the calendar and then I'll select January the 5th. For the manufacturing warranty start, I'm going to select today's date, which is the 13th. And then for the warranty end, I'll select today's date but plus a year. And then I'm going to create these automatic serial numbers by selecting create. And then you need to select update. And then OK. And then select add on the goods receipt PO. Then select yes. Okay, I'm going to close this window and I'm going to create a sales order. I'm going to go to sales and then sales order. Going to type in the customer C30,000. I'm going to put in the automatic delivery date, which happens to be today. Going to select the item number K4000 again, and for a quantity of 1. At this stage you can right click on the quantity to select the serial number and assign a serial number against the stock item for the sales order, but we are not going to do that in this demo. So I'm going to add this sales order. And then if I go to the last record, and then I'm going to create a delivery for this item. So I'm going to select copy to and then delivery. And then because this is going out of stock, it will automatically force you to select a serial number. So I'm going to add this delivery. Then I'll select yes. And then here you can select which serial number you want to put against the stock item against this delivery. I'm going to select the top one. I'll click this arrow across and then I'll click update. And then I select OK. And then I select add again to the delivery. And then I'll select yes. Okay, so that's been delivered now. Just going to close this window. Okay, so now I'm going to go to a report which shows the serial numbers. So I'm going to go to stock management, stock reports, and then serial number transactions. Here I'm going to type in the item number K4000 to K4000. Then select OK. Here the top one selected, the K4 ending with the 1. Here we can see the transactions for this serial number. So here we've got the in, which has the goods receipt PO. And then on the second line, we've got the delivery, which has caused the one to go out. And then if we select the one underneath, the K400 ending in 2, and then here we can see it's got just the one in, and it's still available and in stock. And that concludes this demonstration.
Okay, so that was the demo. Thanks very much for that, Chris. We're going to carry on thinking about capabilities that we need. And we're going to think about how we actually track the product. What are our options for doing that? So Chris will take us through that in more detail. But briefly, we have the option to track on every transaction or on release only. So on release only means that we can receive items into stock without having to assign serial numbers at the point they're received. Whereas on every transaction, it means we must capture information at every point we touch the product. So I'm going to hand over to you, Chris, now. Chris is going to explain the differences of those options and what our choices are. So, Chris, over to you.
So, on the stock item, we can choose to set it so that if you choose on every transaction, then you have to assign either the serial number or batch when it first gets moved into stock. Therefore, the system will prompt you to enter the serial number or batch when you will do a goods receipt in. And this way you know exactly which items are in stock and which unique items have been shipped to the customer. This method is useful when you track the individual products at all times and where receiving staff have the appropriate information at the time the units are received. When you first receive the serialized items into stock, you can choose the option to enter serial numbers manually or to create serial numbers automatically using the serial numbers string of your choice, as we saw in the demo I just did. On release only means that the serial numbers are only required on the process documents that issue an item out of a warehouse. Release documents not only include goods issue, delivery, sales invoices and goods issue to production, but also stock transfers between warehouses and goods return and credit documents. When you use on release only, at the time of purchase, there is no need to enter serial number attributes. However, when you remove the item from stock, the serial numbers for these product items must be created first using the serial item management window. An alternate option is to choose automatic serial numbering creation on receipt. When you purchase the serialized number, the system automatically creates successive numerical serial numbers for the quantity that you have purchased. With this option, you can immediately release these product items without further operations. You can update the serial number attributes at a later stage, again using the serial item management window. This is especially useful when a large quantity is produced or purchased. Why might you choose on release only? One example might be if you manufacture an item and would like it to issue it into stock without a serial number. This way you can wait to assign the serial number until item is picked for delivery. Release only gives you the flexibility to not worry about serial numbers inside the warehouse. Unlike release documents that issue products from stock, serial and batch information is always optional on sales orders because sales orders do not have any effect on stock levels, only creating a commitment. If you would like this commitment to capture information about a specific serialized item or specify a batch to be sold, then you can do so in the sales order. Reserving specific serial numbers or batches at the time of the sales order allows for better control and stock planning. Perhaps you build some customized computers as special orders for customers. In that case, you may wish to designate a serial number in the sales order that will follow the computer through the customizing process until delivery. Once you have allocated the serial number in the sales order, the serial information will be copied to target documents for picking, delivering, or invoicing. After the serial number is assigned to a sales order, you cannot select it for another document without cancelling the serial number allocation in the original document. Closing or cancelling the sales order automatically cancels its serial number allocation. When you copy the sales order to a target document, such as delivery, the serial number window will open automatically so that you can confirm that this is the serial number you wish to use, or you can update it with a new serial number. However, once the serialized item leaves the warehouse on a delivery document, you can no longer view or change the serial numbers on a sales invoice. If a credit note is created, then you will be able to view the serial number window to confirm or update the serial numbers.
Okay, so that window, Chris, because it's a credit note for a specific customer, presumably it's going to show you the serial numbers that that customer has.
Yeah, so it'll be matched off against you'd usually create it from the invoice, and then it'll use the batch or serial number that's...
Okay, doing the copy from invoice to credit feature. Okay. Thanks very much for that. We've got another demo we've put together for you now, just to have a look at batch numbers and how the batch numbers features are going to work. So I'm going to hand over to Chris to take you through that.
In this demo, we set an item to be managed by batches. We receive a batch of this item into inventory, then sell and deliver a quantity to the customer. We go to stock management, then item master data. We then type in the item number and then select find. So we have a requirement to manage the printer cartridges by batches. So from manage item by, we'll select batches. And we want to manage batches every time this item comes into or out of stock. So we'll set the management method to on every transaction. And then we select update. And then select OK. So now we're going to put some of these goods into the warehouse. So we're going to create a goods receipt PO. So we go to purchasing and then goods receipt PO. We type in the supplier name. Select the item number. And we're going to have a quantity of 150. So we need to now right click on the quantity field and select batch serial numbers. And now here we can input our batches. So I'm going to put batch 200 for a quantity of 50. And in batch attribute 1 we're going to put the country that they originated from. So this is Thailand. And we can also input the expiry date. So this one has an expiry date of a year. And I'll put in the next batch. And this has an expiry date of 18 months. And this one has an expiry date of 2 years. And then we select update. So now I've got 3 batches of 50 quantity. and select OK. So now we're going to add this goods receipt PO, and then select yes. Okay, so now a customer has ordered 60 of these printer cartridges. So we're going to create a sales order. We go to sales and then sales order. Type in the customer name. We put in the default delivery date. So we select the item number here and the quantity. So at this stage we want to choose which batches we're going to assign to the sales order. The customer has a requirement that they want an expiry date of at least 6 months minimum, so we can check here. So if we right click on the quantity, select batch serial numbers, so if we go to the form settings, and then we'll select available batches, which is the window where the fields are looking at. Okay, so the expiry date's already there, so if we scroll across, we can see that all the expiry dates meet the criteria of at least having 6 months expiry date. So we're just going to auto select the batches, and these popped up on the right hand side, and then we'll select update and then select OK, and now we're going to add the sales order. So now we'll go to the last date record for the sales order, and this brings up the sales order we just created, and now we're going to create a delivery for this sales order. So we go to delivery, and this will copy across the information. So if I right click on the quantity again and go to batch serial numbers, here we can see it's got the same batches assigned as the sales order. So I'm just going to select OK and then add this delivery and select yes. And now this stock has been delivered to the customer. That concludes the batches demo.
Okay, that was very informative. Thanks for that, Chris. We're just going to summarise where we've got to. So, thinking about the business reasons that we're looking for. For some industries, tracking stock is essential. So we obviously think of food and the pharmaceutical industry as prime examples of that. But there are lots of industries where tracking either serial numbers or batches is important. Tolerance in engineering, as I say, purity of refined substances, etc. There's lots of reasons why we might want to do that. Business processes that are involved in stock tracking need to include consideration of how you're going to allocate batch and serial numbers. If you're in the supply chain rather than manufacturing, then you may well want to use manufacturers' numbers throughout, because that simplifies things. If you are manufacturing or refining, then you may need to think about how that works. At what point are they allocated? Where do you need to track it? What kind of reporting do you need to bring out? So there's a consideration of the business processes that you have, as well as then mapping that into what the capabilities of the software provides. So Chris is just going to give a summary of what we've seen in the capabilities of the software in the SAP product.
Okay, so serial numbers are used to track individual items. These would usually be high value items, for example computers. And batches are to track quantities of items with common characteristics. So you might have batches of food, and then these would all have expiry dates that need to be tracked. You have the option to set serial numbers or batch numbers to be assigned on every transaction or to be assigned on release only. The management method on every transaction mandates that you assign serial number attributes for every single unit at the first point that it enters stock. On release only means that serial numbers are required on documents that issue an item out of the warehouse.
Okay, so thanks very much for that, Chris. That concludes our formal presentation. Are there any questions? Well, we've had a couple of questions in on the chat window. By all means, submit some more if you'd like them. So let's just see if I can read this one. How can a single stock code with a serial number be part of a batch if we choose the code to be managed by batches or by serial numbers? That's an excellent question. Chris?
Okay, so the way you'd manage that is you'd set the stock item to be managed by serial numbers. So for all intents and purposes in the software it works as a serial number, but you can use one of the fields to track the batch number, and also we can add other fields to track any of those batch properties throughout the system. So effectively have the batch information but be treated as a serial numbered item.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. I've got a question here. So what data can we store against a batch or serial number? So, Chris, what type of data, how many items of data can we store against batches and serial numbers?
So the usual fields for batches would be expiry date is very common, and then there's fields for batch attributes. So people put in the location of where the batches come from, but also we can add what we call user-defined fields. So we can essentially add any information that's required on the batch or the serial number.
Okay, so there's going to be standard attributes, but we can customize that if that's what people need.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, excellent. Here we are. This is a good one. Can we store a document against a batch, for example, conformance testing, and then include that document with all deliveries from that batch? Okay, so my understanding of that is we've got a batch where we've done some testing. So let's say this is the engineering industry. We've got to supply to customers. We've got to meet certain tolerances that they've given us. So we do conformance testing to show we've met those tolerances, and we want to send the certificate for the specific batches that we're supplying when we make deliveries from that batch. Chris, how do we do that?
Okay, so what we'd do is, as I mentioned before, we can use user-defined fields. So we'd use a user-defined field to record the location of where the certification document is. And then from there, when we create any delivery, we can use that information to attach the certificate to the delivery, and then that will get tracked throughout the system. Okay,
so effectively we need to customize the way the process is working so that the relevant touch points can access that information. So can we do it? Yes. Is it going to work straight out of the box? Not without a bit of help. So we'd obviously need to look at specific requirements and work out what needs to happen. But that's one of the great things about this product from SAP. You get a lot of functionality as standard, but then you can also use it, I guess, as a kind of a toolkit. Calling it a toolkit is probably unfair, but if your business process is not going to be the same as the standard process, making it work the way you need it to is requires some effort, but it's A, possible, and B, relatively straightforward when you consider the restrictions you have in some other products. Okay, another question in here. How easy is it to migrate from our existing package to the SAP package?
So this is quite an open question. So we've had customers that previously come from Sage, so we're experienced converting the data from Sage into Business One. And also any system that's based on SQL, we can write queries to get the data out. And then any other software packages, as long as you can give us a list of the information or we can get access to it, should be fine to be able to migrate the data over.
Okay, so we have commercially we have something we call the fast track implementation. The idea of that is at a fixed cost, so you can plan it. We take the necessary data to get you up and running into the system, and we're obviously taking the risk on how long that takes. It doesn't give you absolutely everything. So, for example, we'll normally import your opening trial balance and open items with customers and suppliers only rather than full transaction history. One of the reasons for doing that is often when people are changing, they might want to recode, they might want some different analysis, and actually doing that on historical data can become a very involved task. So we can't take the risk on doing all of that. But we do that at a fixed price, so the standard price for that is £3,000. For most people implementing a product of the size of SAP, that is very low. People typically paying tens of thousands of pounds for this kind of thing. What we're saying is we want to put that product in the reach of smaller businesses. Having a sensible process to migrate into a known starting point is obviously important for that. So that's why we have the fast track. Of course, you can have more work done if you want to. We'll do a project plan, cost it out, and just agree what it is that you need. But for £3,000, we take the risk on taking your existing data and getting it in so that you can get up and running. So it's kind of a known starting point. Okay, another question here. What license levels do we need to enable stock tracking? Okay, well, I can answer that one. So obviously software comes with different license levels, with the Ambition Enterprise, which is our license for providing the SAP software. We have our entry-level license, which is up to 5 named users. That's £26 per month. We call that Ambition Accelerator. You get all the functionality included in SAP Business One Starter Pack, which includes all the full functionality for tracking stock. So that includes serial numbers, batch numbers. So in order to use serial numbers and batch numbers, you can use that low-level license, no problem. If you need more than 5 named users, then you need a different licensing regime, and under that licensing regime you can have people who have a partial license, so they don't they get a license at a lower cost, but they don't get access to all of the features of the system. If their license gives them access to stock, then they will be able to do everything with serial numbers and batch numbers. If they don't have access to stock, then obviously they can't, because they're not in that part of the system. So every license that we provide would include that. Okay, so there's no more questions coming up. By all means, contact us if you've got specific questions. What we'll do is we'll just amend the slides to put those questions on the end of the slide deck before we upload the video. So my guess is the video will be available hopefully at some point tomorrow. We'll email everyone a link just so they can access that. And thank you all very much for attending. Our next software webinar is to do with charities. So that'll be in April. We'll be sending out details of how to connect to that in due course. So until then, of course we may speak to you in the meantime, but until then it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Thanks very much for attending, and we'll speak to you soon.